Well, should we go ahead and get started? I know it's 6:30 and we want to be respectful of everyone's time.
So I have a document, and I emailed this to Melissa, and it's just a simple Word document, and the name is wrong, but oh well, whatever. I changed it this morning. I added stable to it. Stable wasn't in this before. So I've done different things. I've had PowerPoints and things like this. I like this little thing because I think it's easier for you to interrupt me if you have questions, and I think it kind of gets to the heart of the matter. So it does presume that you kind of understand at least the concepts of a trust. If you have questions and want me to review something more in depth, happy to do that. So so I work for Community Fund Ohio. We're Community Fund Management Foundation, but we're changing our name. It's not official yet, but we are to Community Fund Ohio, mainly because Community Fund Management Foundation is too long. I think Community Fund Ohio is also too long, but whatever. I saved a whole word, so that's what I'm going to go with. So we're a nonprofit, and we were actually started in 1993. Of the 88 counties in Ohio, about 80 of them, 84 of them actually, contributed money to start Community Fund, because in 1992, the federal government passed a law that allowed you to create what are called wholly discretionary pooled trusts. And so that's what we were. And the DD organizations in Ohio wanted this for their clients. So that's why we were started. We were actually housed in the Cuyahoga County DD offices until about 10 years ago. It's 11 years ago now. So when we became self-sufficient.
Sorry, Amber Alert here.
Going off everywhere. So I'm also going to point something out, and that is that I had never, ever give these presentations at home because I have 4 dogs, and I was on vacation until late last night, and so I felt bad, and I'm giving this at home. I have shut all the blinds, so I don't think they're going to bark, because that's usually what sets them off, something out front. But if the dogs bark, well, welcome to my world. They bark. Yeah. Anyway. So Community Fund was created to provide an option for people to set money aside so they could retain their benefits. And originally, one of the main trusts that people think about with Community Fund is this payback trust. That's where you have someone in your life who's on Medicaid or SSI, all right, and they come into some money that would make them lose their benefits, all right? Mm-hmm. And then when that happens, now, and we still offer that. But now if they come into less than $15,000 and you send that money to Community Fund, we would say, whoa, 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 what are you doing? There's a stable account. You don't need to use us for that, okay? So if you have someone in your life who gets like a Social Security back award, or let's say they're in a car accident and they get some sort of award from that, or somebody dies and leaves them money, they were working at Kroger and they've left and they're going to cash out their 401k because they didn't do the pension. Those situations, that money is a resource that would impact their SSI or their Medicaid. So food stamps, maybe even Section 8 housing, something like that. In those circumstances, if it's less than $15,000, you would put it into a stable account. If it's more than $15,000, you'd use something like a Community Fund payback trust. Both the stable account and the payback trust mean that Medicaid is entitled to demand payment from the trust when the individual dies if that person has received Medicaid benefits. All right. So the stable account is nice because if the person is under 65 when they pass away, the Department of Medicaid really actually can't go after it. But for payback trusts, anything that Medicaid's paid out, they're going to be able to collect against a pooled trust. All right, against a payback trust. Now, but that's not usually what we want to talk about, because that's kind of like, those are the things that happen in life because there wasn't any planning, right? You're in a car, nobody plans to be in a car accident. Nobody plans to get a Social Security back award, and nobody plans to get an inheritance. I mean, they hope to, but they don't plan it. But if on the flip side, what I'd like to talk about is if you're planning. So you're preparing for your child's future, and you want to look at estate planning in that sense. In that case, you would want to create not a payback trust, but a wholly discretionary trust. A wholly discretionary trust where you're the grantor, your money is going into it, and you've planned ahead, or your parents, your sibling, whoever has planned ahead. This means that your child with a disability can obtain the benefits from the trust without it ever being considered a resource. So they can use the interest, the principal, whatever they need to in that trust, but they don't own it. And that's important because since they don't own it, there's no payback provision. So what they get to use the money during their lifetime for whatever they need. If there is money left over in the trust, when they pass away, it's going to go, because you created the trust. So it's going to go to your other heirs, your other children, your grandchildren, a charity of your trust, of your choice, whoever you want it to go to. All right. Now, so this is for your money. You can also place your money into a stable account, but you're limited there. That's money you have to really be giving away during your lifetime, because you can only put a maximum of $15,000 a year in there. That's not, you can maybe do more if your child works, but let's just stick with the 15. So you can only put about $15,000 a year into a stable account. And it has that payback provision. So that's a big difference. It might not, it's weird because the stable accounts have the payback provision, but I will say Ohio Stable has been really good at not actually having to do the payback. So, so I don't want to say it's always going to happen that you're going to have a payback, but no matter what, there are going to be a few more hoops to jump through to get the money out. And so to me, I think stable account is something that's really useful if your child is working and in conjunction with a trust. Right. So once you've passed away and you want, and some people like this, some people, the trust can put money into a stable account, and that's because it's easier to get money out. We'll get to that in a minute. So, so when you're looking at creating a wholly discretionary trust in your estate planning, there are two major things you can choose. You can use a nonprofit like community fund, and we are not the only one. I don't want to pretend that we're the only trust out there. There are other options. They're not as good as us. They aren't. And then also they haven't been around as long. We're one of the oldest in the country, but we're also we have, to the best of our knowledge, we are the largest trust in the country. So of individuals' funds. We have over $100 million in trust, and that's growing. That's the last time I asked. I haven't asked in a long time. So I'm sure now with the way the market's been going, we have a lot more. But so we have quite a bit, and we have over 2,000 trusts. So we're very large, and we only serve people who are residents of the state of Ohio. And so those are things to think about, because especially if you're here with the military and you could see yourself being transferred out of state and not coming back, then somebody like Community Fund is probably not going to be the best choice for you, because again, it's only for Ohio residents. So you might not want to lock yourself into somebody like Community Fund. You might want to look at a private trust. I will say there are national pooled trust organizations. I am wary of them. We hear lots of stories of them having problems in various states because they're in too many states to know the rules very well. So I would be wary of a national trust organization. Sometimes it's your only option. But the other option besides doing a pooled trust for your discretionary trust is to create a private trust. And there you hire an attorney to create a trust, all right, to write a trust. The thing about the private trust, here, let me move this up a little bit. The thing about a private trust is you need to make sure that your attorney is very knowledgeable about Medicaid and Social Security law, all right, because we've seen lots of mistakes happen. There was a case in Athens, Ohio, where the parent kept telling the attorney, my child will never need Medicaid because they get my health insurance for the rest of their life. Now, the mother did not understand that Medicaid is not only health insurance, but it's also those waivers that provide the care, right? And the attorney didn't know either. And so the attorney drafted an agreement that did not protect the assets from Medicaid. Well, the problem was when mom died, the child was living with her in the house, and that was the goal, that the child continued to live with her. Well, he now had $500,000 in assets, and Medicaid said he's not getting Medicaid. And health insurance aside, who was going to come in and care for him 24 hours a day? That was going to be $80,000 a year in private caregivers. So that's not going to last very long. And that's why it's so important that the attorney understand what they're getting into when they do a private trust, because they need to understand all the parameters of that. The advantage of a pooled trust like Community Fund is that the attorney just helps them fill out the joinder application. I still say you really want to go to an attorney who's really knowledgeable about Medicaid and Social Security, because I always say this, and I mean this, I work for Community Fund. I do think it's a very good product. I love it actually, and I think that we do a wonderful job, but it might not be the right choice for you, and you need to have your attorney make that decision for you. So even I do private work, and I work a lot in Kentucky and Indiana, and sometimes I don't use pooled trust because, like I said, the families tell me, well, we're going to move to North Carolina in 3 years. Well, why would we do a pooled trust that's specific to a state if you're going to move? So it's not necessarily the best choice. The advantage of Community Fund, though, of doing that, our trust agreement exists already. It's been written, and the attorney is just filling out something for housekeeping purposes, and their job is to give you advice. But the trust itself is already drafted to preserve your child's benefits. That's its actual decision. And that's the great advantage of it. It's done. It's been drafted. It's been designed, and it's passed muster. Usually the Social Security Administration has changed it, has reviewed it. So from 1993 to today, our trust has been revised. Our pooled trust has been revised 13 times, and our master trust has been revised 3 times. And so that means that, and each time we're having attorneys review that. So if you had drafted your own private trust in 1993, if you'd hired an attorney to do that, you probably would have had to have amended it at least 3 times now to be up to date with current changes. And that's an important thing to realize, that if you have a private trust, that's up to you to make sure it's being updated. So now you've funded this trust, right? And somebody has to decide what comes out of it, what's going to be spent from the trust, and making sure that it's still up to date that make sure that they're in compliance with Medicaid rules. And here's my example. This is my famous example. So if you've ever heard me talk, you've heard me tell this one before. So lots of families, it was a really big thing, go swimming with the dolphins when you're in Florida. And if you, and it actually was our old, poster board with someone swimming with the dolphins. And so in Ross County, they said, we submitted an invoice for dolphin therapy and you guys denied it. And you want us to do all this stuff. What's going on? So what we know at Community Fund is that if you make the trust for Community Fund cannot pay for medical and housing expenses that would be covered by Social Security or Medicaid. All right, we can't do that. If we do, then it's an asset. Then the whole trust is a resource. So when we got an invoice for dolphin therapy is medical. Our advice back was, we can't pay this bill. If we pay this invoice, we're going to have a serious problem here. When you do your annual review for benefits, they're going to say, hey, you're paying medical expenses. So what we said is, hey, just submit this to Medicaid, who's going to deny it, or they're just not going to pay it after some period of time, and then we can reimburse it after the fact. But we need evidence that that Medicaid wasn't going to pay for this. All right, and so that's our job, is to make sure that anything that is spent out of the trust isn't going to negatively impact things. All right, so oh, I'm sorry, there's a typo here. All right, so families can appoint a trust advisor. We at Community Fund, that's a mistake, can appoint what's called a designated advocate. Sorry, I realized. Okay, oh, sorry. Let me just fix that, and I'll send the correct one later, Melissa. So families can appoint a designated advocate, who requests the money. That's our word for that. Now, if you use a private trust, if you have your attorney draft up a private trust, the trustee decides whether or not money is spent, right? And that's going to be usually a bank, could be a family member, sorry. And many people name a family member along with a bank. And then it's up to the trustee. Oh, stop it. Sorry, I was working from home, the dogs are right. And I shut all the blinds. My house is pitch black. It's at 6:30 at night because I shut all the blinds. Because there's runners and they would go crazy. But I think one of the dogs was outside. She came in through the doggy door and set them all. All right, so the trustee in a private trust, they have the final decision. So and that's a big thing. So if they're an individual, they can easily make mistakes, and it happens. But those mistakes can have repercussions, and that's why that can be a problem. Many banks, if they're uncertain if they should make a disbursement or not, they will hire an attorney to review the disbursement request. And then after the attorney does that, the trust will pay the attorney's fee. Does that make sense? And so that's a cost that can be built into a trust. And if you name a family member as the trustee, they might oftentimes have to investigate and talk to an attorney whether or not they can spend something, because it's not their area of expertise. You are exposed to Medicaid and Social Security over a long period of time, and I don't think any of you would say you're experts in it. And so to expect if you name your other child to be the trustee, they're not going to be an expert in it. And so that's important. And so they're going to have to oftentimes go out and figure that out. Now, if you have money in a stable account, the great advantage of the stable account is that whoever has control of the account, and that might be you during your lifetime, that's probably going to be you. After you passed away, it might be your child or a representative payee or your other typical child. That person decides whether or not they want to spend the money out of the trust. In theory, the Social Security Administration can demand an audit of disbursements, but to date, they have not done that to the best of our knowledge. I have never heard, and we have constant, nationwide conferences about this. To the best of our knowledge, at no point has the Social Security Administration done an audit of any stable account. That's really nice in many ways. The downside to that is what I always point out is the downside is that what's in that stable account, really, they can take anything out and there's no oversight. That's always been my concern with stable accounts, which is why I'm not crazy about suggesting you put large sums of money in there. When you're alive, you can oversee that. You're not, especially if it's your money, you're probably not going to put money in there and then abscond with it. But once you've passed away, there's really no oversight on what comes out of a stable account. It's just a bank account that doesn't have, and there's nothing that can be done. Once it's gone, it's gone. We see this a lot with mentally ill individuals who have stable accounts, where if the money goes in, it's gone within a week or two. So, and that's because if they're in a manic state, they spend it all. So it's not as big of a problem in the developmental disability world because the individuals might not have the ability to do that, but the family member or someone else who has access to the account can wipe it out, and there's really no recourse. So if they have control, they can do that. So, all right. So, but we want to, so, in that private trust, if they spend the money inappropriately, then Medicaid can claim that the trust is an asset. Now, when they do that, if the trust is written properly, it has something called a poison pill, which means the trust terminates. And the trust terminates and it goes on to the residual beneficiary, which is probably your typical kid. And that's why I'm always very, very worried about naming a family member as a trustee, because if they make a mistake, their punishment is they get all the money right away. So, so that's my worry with private trusts. Sometimes they're the right thing. I personally, as an attorney, I almost never will name a family member as a trustee. I require that my clients use a bank because I just feel like I've seen so much fraud from kids that I don't really like it. I'm not comfortable with them. And, in my own family, so my aunt was developmentally disabled and my grandparents died very young. They were in their 50s. And it was the early 70s. And back then, when you had a child with a disability, there was only one choice. You had to disinherit them. And so my aunt was disinherited, and half went to my uncle and half went to my mom. My mom was 32 when her sister died, and she and her sister were only 11 months apart. They were Irish twins. And so she grew up with her sister, and she had a great sense of obligation for her. My uncle, when his parents died, was 19. He had not grown up in the same home with his sister. When he was young, my grandmother was a little bit overwhelmed by the whole situation, and she placed her in a group home at that time. So he didn't have the same connection to his sister that my mom did. And suffice it to say that until she died 3 years ago, my mom still felt that she had money left of what they inherited, and my uncle didn't feel that way. So he felt that they'd spent her money, that she'd spent all of her money long ago, and I don't think my mother would have ever thought that her third had been spent. So so you don't know what you're going to get, and having grown up with that, I'm not crazy about family members. All right, so we talked about the in these types of trust, the law does change for Medicaid and Social Security and Ohio laws. That does happen. So in community fund, if there's a change in that trust, we update it. We go and amend the trust, which you can do. We amend the trust to always make sure it's complying with the current laws. And when they do that, there's no fee associated with that. There's no fee at all because it exists there. Also, the same thing, Wayne, when you decide, when you've named who you want to be your designated advocate, the one to request money on behalf of your child, if you want to change that or add more names, let's say you name you have 3 kids and you name your 2 typical kids to be the designated advocates. Then now your grandkids are getting older and they're very involved in their aunt or uncle's life. And so you want to add them again. You can make those changes. You just send us a letter and we keep it in the file. And so that's not a problem. If you have a private trust, whenever you're making changes like that, you're going to have to amend your trust. And most attorneys are going to charge you an hourly fee for that. Most families that I see who have a private trust want to have it reviewed every 5 to 6 years to make sure, A, that it's still up to date with what's going on, and also that it still reflects what they want to have happen. And so when you do a private trust, you need to take that into consideration when you're budgeting, because it's something that you're going to want to double check and look at. And now there's an attorney here in town, and I don't disagree with him, that if the trust is well written, you're not going to need to amend it. You're not. But you probably, you don't know that necessarily. And what we see is lots of amending residual beneficiaries and trustees and trust advisors. We see those kinds of changes happen a lot. Now, if there's any kind of change that would impact Stable, you have an account with Stable, and I know they update as any new law is enacted that impacts them about how much money can be kept in them. Rollovers of 529 accounts. So, we always talk about at Stable, you can put $15,000 a year into a Stable account. But if your child is working and they gross up to $12,981 a year, I believe that's correct, then they can actually put $27,000 and change into the account. And that's the poverty level amount. So they can put their entire wage, every dime they make, can be placed into the Stable account. Plus, you can still get $15,000 a year. And that's important because we had a young man who inherited about $54,000. And so year one, and he worked and he made $13,000 a year. And now he spent that money. But the disbursements from the inheritance were one in November of one year and one in February of the next. And so we were able to put $27,000 in Stable in year one and $27,000 in Stable in year 2, and avoid one of those payback trusts we talked about before, right? Because this was an inheritance that wasn't planned properly. And so it was going to go in his name and he was going to lose benefits. He would have had to use a Medicaid payback trust, but because of the job, he was able to put all this money into a Stable account, which was kind of a nice little quick, easy way it was a quick fix. There's no doubt about it. We're going to get to the cost in a second. That is the most efficient, cost-efficient way to put money. And again, the problem with the Stable account is it's not really an option for you in estate planning because of the annual limitations, if that's your only way of planning, then you're saying I'm only going to leave my child $15,000, which usually isn't the point of estate planning. Now, obviously that $15,000 amount should change before you pass away. It's going to go up occasionally, but still we don't know exactly what it's going to be. It's never going to be an unlimited amount. I mean, I don't think it will ever be an unlimited amount. And so you have to keep that into consideration when you have to take that into consideration for planning purposes. What we're seeing with stable is that your private trust or your community fund trust, the negative side to the wholly discretionary trust is it cannot be an asset, right? And to do that, it cannot provide basic living expenses for housing, food, and medical. Well, of course, that's really what you want to provide for. You want to make sure they have someplace nice to live, they have all they need to eat, and they have good nutrition, and they have all the medical care they need. So for the record, Medicaid should cover their medical, right? That's the purpose of it. Now, Medicaid will pay for a tooth extraction, they will not pay for a root canal. So again, these trusts can pay for medical expenses that Medicaid will not cover. So they're almost like a payer of second resort. So if you decide, that you don't, it's decided that a root canal would be a better choice, and it would be a better choice, then you would use the money from the trust to pay for the root canal, because we know Medicaid's not going to pay for that. Housing and food, that's much harder. But the neat thing is, these trusts, either a private trust or a pooled trust, after you've passed away, remember, these are funded usually after you've passed away, they can take up to $15,000 a day today, and it'll change over time, it'll get to be more, and place that money into the child's stable account. Now, you can pay for the housing. So if your child, and this is also how stable accounts used during your lifetime, if your child moves out of the house and you're going to have them rent or on a condo or something like that, and it would be cost prohibitive, they can't afford to pay for it. If you supplement their housing cost, their SSI, their SSI payment would be decreased based on how much you supplement. Like, so for every $3 you give them, they lose $1 of SSI. But if you take that exact same amount of money and deposit it into a stable account, and then the stable account pays for the rent or their food, that's totally allowable, and their SSI payment is not impacted at all. It's called legalized money laundering. It's like codified money laundering. They literally put it into the code. Here's what you do, and they don't care. It's totally allowed. So that is it's the greatest way of, if you're worried about them moving out on their own, this will not impact their benefits. You can use the stable account as a pass-through to cover those expenses. If they, maybe they get food stamps, but you want to get them more, more veggies or more whatever, you can use the stable account to provide all of that, and it's allowed. And it doesn't look, it's not treated as a gift. And again, in the DD world, you have some other benefits, but in the mental health world, it's a huge benefit, because most mentally ill people only get SSI, and they don't get any waiver services. So the parents are trying to provide, and they're trying to provide better housing options. And so the stable account is how you do that. And so now your child gets their maximum SSI award, and you're able to help provide for them. So that's a really handy, neat tool. So even after you pass away, once you're gone and you don't need, the trust, either a community fund trust or a private trust, can still put that same maximum amount into a stable account. Now, again, what we say about this is it's why it's so important that the right people are in charge of these accounts, because once the money's in the stable account, we've seen people spend it, like it's all gone. The money that's supposed to be the rent for the year can be gone in an hour, because there's no oversight to it. And so that's why it's so important. That's why I'm not crazy about saying, hey, yeah, put all your money in here. Because if you're putting $15,000 a year in here until it has $100,000 or $500,000, which is the max they can have is $500,000 right now. And it has $500,000 5 hours after you're dead and someone else is in charge of this account. In theory, it could be gone. And obviously there'd be some criminal fraud issues there. I'm not pretending there's not, but yay, get it back. That's,
Still
you know,
get
they're not the same thing. So that's always the fear. So so that's why the stable account to me is a great tool along with the trust. It's a great tool for you to teach your child how to use money and credit cards and things like that, because it offers those options. Like if you want to see if your child can handle a credit card, you can go and get a stable account for very little money. The fee is $2.50 a month for an Ohio resident. I believe that's still accurate. So so $2.50 a month. You can open up a stable account. You can put $500 in there. You can on the credit card, you can say it's only good at this Walgreens, at this Kroger, at wherever you want to say, this GameStop. GameStop's in the news. That was always my example. Now everyone knows what it is. You know, they can spend $38.98 a month or a week at GameStop. And you can put that into that credit card, that limitation. It'll text you when your child goes there and buys something. And so that's a great way for you to see if they're using money wisely, because you can control it. That's amazing. And for the price, like that can't be beat. So that's how a stable account is so useful. And obviously their money, they still have control and access to it. And that's why the stable account is so great. The fees for the other options are very different. So so community fund, if you wanted to set up a community fund trust, this is that pooled, wholly discretionary trust that has no payback clause. If you'd set up a dry trust, you'd pay right now you'd pay $750. You do not pay any other fee usually until you die, or until it has $15,000, and that's usually what it is. You die, it's funded. Your life insurance, whatever goes in there, and they take out the other $750, and then from that point on, there are fees every year. But until then, there's no fee. Now, Indiana has a pooled trust. They charge like $85 a year, just as an administrative fee. But community fund has never done that. So, when it's empty, they don't have any empty trust fees. So they call them dry trusts. The advantage of it being set up, if you know you're going to stay in Ohio, it's there. It has a tax ID. And now the great advantage of that is you can, on your life insurance policy, you can list the trust as a beneficiary. On your 401k, you can list the trust as a beneficiary because you have your own, it has its tax ID, it exists. I am not suggesting you want to put any money into it. Generally, people do not until after they've passed away. There are sometimes reasons people want to fund them now. And that might be like if you were diagnosed with Parkinson's and you knew you had a finite time before you might need Medicaid, then you might want to fund these trusts now to get some money out of your estate. But generally, they're not funded until later. Once it has $15,000 in it, the trust charges an annual $250 a year on any account for $50,000 and over. And then on everything that's over $50,000, it's still that $250 for the first $50,000, and then 0.25% on everything over $50,000. Okay, and then our current trustee is Huntington National Bank, and they charge a trustee fee of 89 basis points, which is like 0.89% of the account. So that's deducted on a monthly basis at the end of the month. So if you take money out, if you withdraw money, the fee is actually lower. We don't understand why they've agreed to that, but so if you're pulling money out of the trust, the fee is, I don't understand how that makes sense, but they were okay with it. So that includes like all the tax documents and all the trustee services. The only time that we ever usually say there's another fee is if there's a stop payment request that's not our fault. If there might be legal fees, but we would tell you that there are legal fees that are going to be assessed. That's pretty rare. Court costs, so that guardianships, when things are through guardianships, there's oftentimes court costs, and then overnight fees. So I was helping somebody in a trust and I messed up. We thought we faxed something and we didn't, and there's a deadline, and so we needed something overnighted, and so that was a fee that that I paid because it was my fault. But anyway, but generally that overnight fee, that's something that's going to be assessed. So otherwise there's no other really costs associated with it. They're pretty open about it. Now, a private trust, you can name your typical child, and they might not necessarily request a fee for that. They're entitled to one, but they're probably going to still hire an investment advisor, right? And that investment company is going to take a fee. They're going to have to hire someone to do the tax prep. If it shouldn't be that expensive, but it depends. It depends who they go to. It can be more expensive. And then if they use a bank, the trustee will usually take about 2% of the trust. So if the trust is worth $500,000, they're going to take $10,000 a year fee. So those trustee fees are going to be much higher than what we charge. Because remember, community fund is a pooled trust. It's, first of all, it's a not-for-profit. It's not, we're just trying to break even. We're not trying to make money off of it. The pooled, and that's a big difference. And so we have, 2,500 accounts, but our investment advisor is, so your account has $2,000 in it or 10,000, but it's being invested with the whole 100 million, and you're just a percentage of the total. And that's how it works out. Versus in a private trust, the trustee just is looking at your singular portfolio. So those fees are going to be a little bit higher. I will say some people feel that they like the private trust because they feel like, and they do, they'd have more control over the investment advice and the investment stance that the trustee is going to take. In a pooled trust, it's the whole decision. It's about earning money while maintaining the value of the portfolio so that it lasts until your child passes away. And again, that's why people do not put money into a community fund trust until after they die. You can grow it better in your own private, with your private investment advisor. But after you die, that's it. There's not any more money going in there. And so our goal is to tend to keep it. Right now, it's anywhere between 40 and 60% stocks versus bonds. So the most they go into the stock market is about 60%, and times they're more worried that there's more volatility, they'll drop it down to 40%. It still has to be invested. In the private trust and the pooled trust, neither of those should be FDIC insured because they're stocks. Now in the stable account, you can either invest in a Vanguard account, and their fees are nonsensically low. But they do, and I didn't think about that, but they do charge Vanguard fees. But if you just go with like a bank account, that is FDIC insured. But you're going to get your 0.02 interest, 2% interest a year, whatever the nonsensically absurd low rate is. So it's not going to gain much of money in there. If you want it to potentially gain, you're getting out of FDIC insured, but that's true for everybody right now. So that's something to think about in all of those options. All right, do you guys have some questions for me? You need to feel free.
I'm just confused.
Okay. So what do you want me to clarify about?
Well, we were setting up our will and I guess our estate. Anyway, we have 2 boys. So we had a lawyer look into it, and he said it was going to cost $1,000 to set up a trust. But that sounded like that would be the only fees.
So, I mean, you mean with community fund or with someone else?
Through what?
So
it was a private lawyer. We had our will drawn up, and in there we were splitting our will, all the money we would have if something would happen to both of us. We have a daughter and 2 boys. We were splitting it evenly. Right. But we wanted to set up a trust so that the boys' money would go into that trust so that they wouldn't lose their SSI. Right. So from what I gathered, this guy saying, set up the trust, it's a one-time fee of $1,000 a piece. And then that's it. So again, if he's setting up a private trust, that's just what he's going to charge you. If he's doing something like with a pooled trust, then that's the fee at the start. You would actually never see any other fees because it's not funded until you pass away. But any trust is going to have fees because someone has to do tax documents. They gotta, you have to invest it. You're going to pay investment fees to buy and sell stocks. So there's always going to be fees associated with it. It's just how it's paid, how you pay those fees. So at community fund, they just have a standard
0.89 basis points. Huntington, that includes all their buying and selling of stocks, right? The trust, like US Bank, they charge 2%. That's it. That's what they charge. But they will also charge you for their investment costs. So, there's always going to be now. And if you name your daughter as the trustee,
Yeah.
she might not take out she might not charge you a fee. She's entitled to one, but she's still going to pay fees for someone to prepare the tax documents, unless she's a CPA. And she probably is going to meet with an investment advisor and pay them something too. So there's always fees. It's just, again, I like to me, it's a real big part of the decision-making process. So I'm going to address it. I think a lot of attorneys don't address it.
No, and I'm not sure how smart he is about this Medicaid, and I don't
So
know.
here's some of the things I like to say. So I'm going to give you some suggestions for questions. When you're meeting with an attorney, you should always ask them to explain to you the difference between SSI, SSDI, and SSDAC. So if they can't kind of explain those to you, they don't know what the hell they're doing and run away. Number one. Number two, you should talk to them and ask them to explain what Medicaid is and what the waivers are.
Because we have both. We're on a waiver.
Right. And a lot of attorneys who do this, they're really elder law attorneys, and the only waiver they've ever heard of is the assisted living waiver. And they're great elder law attorneys, but the assisted living waiver has nothing to do with the DD world. And so if they don't understand those waivers, that was the case that I was telling you about in Athens, where the woman said, my child doesn't need Medicaid, because the attorney didn't know that there was such a thing as a waiver. Like if you told me that, I'd be like, well, who's taking care of your kid when you're dead? Now, one of the things you mentioned is that you want to protect your children's SSI. And I would point out that if you or your spouse work and have paid into Social Security, when you pass away, either when you retire or when you pass away, most likely your children will no longer get SSI. They will get SSDAC, which is Social Security for Dependent Adult Children. So if you remember your Social Security statement that you used to get in the mail, then you didn't, then you did again. And it was a form, and it would say, if you stopped work, if you were disabled, or if you died now, your dependent children will get X dollars a month. You would get $3,000 and they'll get $1,500 a month. Your child will get that for the rest of his or her life after you die.
So,
and that's not Social Security. That's not SSI.
Our boys who are our dependents at home, they're in their 30s. So if we would die, they would get it?
Yes. When you retire, they will get it. They will go up. So, okay, so remember I told you my grandparents died in 1972 when they were 50 years old. When they died, and this is you're already past that. If you died right now, this might be a problem for you too. If you live much longer, it won't be an issue. So when they died, she was 30 years old, and she no longer got SSI. She got their retirement benefits. Okay. The SSDAC. So she wasn't actually on SSI for a very long time, but they died young and she was young. And so by the time she was about 60, when she'd been on their retirement for 30 years, remember they should have been 65 when they got it. So when they would have been 95, when that happened, now suddenly the cost of living increases, the COLA adjustments for retirement, they were no longer helpful to her. And so at that point, she was still getting their retirement, which was then about like 500 and something a month, $500. I mean, when they died, she was getting like $350 a month. That was a ton of money in 1972. But by then it just wasn't really keeping up. And so at the very end of her life, she went back on SSI. She was still getting their retirement amount, but because everybody who should have gotten it was long dead. I mean, she lived 50 years after they died.
Oh, wow.
Nobody lives to be 115.
No.
So they don't really, the COLA increases don't still kind of happen in that. And so she was getting their retirement and SSI. So mainly their retirement, like $200 a month on SSI. So if you live long enough, your kids will never go back on SSI because they're not going to live to be 115. So, it's not realistic. So then and also the amount of money you get now is so much more than SSI. SSI is crap. And the retirement benefits your kids are going to get are so much higher. It's unlikely that they'd ever catch up. So so when you pass away, they won't need their SSI. We're not trying to protect their SSI. We're trying to protect their Medicaid waiver. All right. That's what you have to remember. It's unlikely that in your death, we need to protect their SSI because they're going to be on SSDAC, the Social Security for Dependent Adult Children.
I've never heard of that before.
I know. Nobody has. It's literally every time I say that, people go, "What are you talking about?" And
so like we are almost retirement age. My husband actually lost his job and he's not working. We're not taking retirement yet. So once we take retirement, maybe at age 70, I don't know. Anyway, then they'll start getting that.
Yes.
And they wouldn't get their SSI amount.
That retirement amount that he's getting for their benefit should be significantly higher than the $780 a month.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you need to go.
Nobody has ever told me that they would get that. Do they have to live with you to get that?
Nope. They just have to be. They have to have been deemed disabled before the age of 18, and they have to be your dependent. They can be independent. They can actually be working, but they can still get it. My brother, he was deemed disabled and he had a mental health issue. So, but for developmentally disabled, it's really easy to get. Yeah. So no, I don't know why. I know. I feel like I always bring it up because so at least every trip, at least one person goes, "I've never heard this before." Yeah. And occasionally what'll happen is when you go and get your benefits, when you go apply for Social Security, you don't mention you have a disabled child. They don't know. They don't make the connection. Then 3, 4, 5, 6 years later, someone finally figures it out. Then your kid gets a massive back award. And then they have to set, and if it's over $15,000, they can't put it in a stable, and then they have to do the Medicaid payback trust. That's where we see huge Social Security back awards that are that have to go into payback trust, because people don't realize that their children get a dependent adult children Social Security award, or their SSI takes forever to get approved. So those are the times we see that.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, and I always bring it up because a lot of people don't know about it. And you can go and talk to the Social Security office and they'll tell you what they need. I would actually start investigating with them to make sure you have everything in place so that as soon as you apply for retirement, I mean, it doesn't matter if you get a few months back payment, but generally it's not really a big problem. They pay it out and it's great. It's a huge difference. And it's so much easier to plan. Also, then, of course, while they're living with you now, once that happens, you can stop charging them rent.
Okay.
So that's another big thing. And that's when we see stable accounts becoming really popular. Right now, your child's getting this much larger amount each month. They don't need to pay you rent. And so they're actually having, you've heard it. I know you have families saying they have too much money. And you're like, how in the heck do they have too much money? That's why, because somebody's retired and they're getting the retirement benefit. They don't have to pay rent anymore. And so they're actually over accumulating. And that's where stable accounts come in handy. So before you
$15,000 a year, right?
Correct. But if let's say you had too much, you could at any time you could open a payback trust, and then you can also transfer money back and forth between the payback trust and the pooled trust, the payback pooled trusts and the stable accounts. And we see there's some reasons you do that. It's a little complicated to go into, but there are reasons you would do that. That you kind of, whichever one has more money right now, you kind of move them one way or the other. So like the stable accounts have caps. At 100,000, they might lose some benefits, but yeah, so there's some different things that you move stuff back and forth.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's something that's really important to know that's out there. And I know I mean, there are people, it's one of those things that I remember telling a family that, and I think the mom cried. She's like, I didn't know they would get our retirement. Like, they're like, this changes our entire planning. And I'm like, yeah, no kidding. Like, they won't need as much. But like, I thought she was going to get $700 the rest of her life. And I'm like, oh no, she's going to get, both the highest of your retirement amounts. So
Okay, because I don't remember seeing that on our retirement forms, but I'm gonna look now.
So it doesn't say SSDAC. It just says if you have a dependent child,
Oh, okay.
they'll get this amount of money. Well, that's how much because they were disabled before 18, they will get that.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't
Oh,
say
I see.
SSDAC, but that's what it's that same amount.
Mhm.
But yeah. So if you look at that, So I know,
Huh.
and that's
But we do have to mention that when we retire.
yes, they will not do that automatically. They don't know that your
They
child's
won't know. Yeah.
your child's getting SSI from the exact same administration. So in theory, they could know, but they are not required
They
to put
won't.
those two things together.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But here's the thing: if you don't tell them, and then 3 or 4 years later you do tell them, it's going to be backdated to when you retired.
Oh, okay.
So, and that's actually why, there is an advantage for you to, I mean, if your husband's lost his job, that's a very different, decision-making process. But my thing is that there's an advantage to waiting to retire when you have a child with disabilities, because yes, if you do the calculation, maybe there's no real reason to wait until your full retirement age, because what's the real long difference, even if you have to live to be X number of years? But your child is going to get the higher amount for the rest of their life.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's why suddenly there's a lot more calculations you have to take into consideration. And there are people who can help you do that. That's not really my world, but but there are people that will help you figure that out. What's the benefit to your child? But your benefit might not be there, but when you take into consideration how much more your children will get each month, maybe there is a benefit to waiting into your full retirement age. But if you're talking 70, that is the full retirement age for everybody anyway. So
yeah, I just wish this was not as complicated. I mean, wouldn't
that be nice?
I know. It's just, well.
Yep. So that's something to take into consideration. But yeah. Do you have another question?
Laura, you mentioned for the Holy Discretionary Trust that you usually don't want to fund it until you die, but I don't think I understand how it's funded.
So usually it's so the Holy Discretionary Trust is usually again, let's go back, you have 3 kids. And so when you die, 1/3 goes to each of your children, except your child with a disability, that his or her third goes into the trust. So usually what we see is a couple of different options. If you have life insurance, and that's really your main life insurance and the house, there's something called a transfer on death affidavit that can take care of the house. And then the life insurance, you're just going to name Johnny gets 1/3, Susie gets 1/3, and the Holy Discretionary Trust for the benefit of Jimmy gets 1/3. All right. So that'd be a life insurance example. Otherwise, let's say you have a will. It's not the ideal way to do it, but it can be done that way where, again, Johnny gets 1/3, Susie gets 1/3, and the Holy Discretionary Trust for the benefit of Jimmy gets 1/3. Or mainly what we see, because trusts are expensive, is that there's a revocable living trust, which is the standard probate avoidance vehicle. All right. So I want to avoid probate. I don't want my estate to go through probate. So I'm going to have a revocable living trust. When I die, everything's in my revocable living trust. And then again, same thing, 1/3 to Johnny, 1/3 to Susie, and 1/3 to the Holy Discretionary Trust for the benefit of Jimmy. So that's what we're talking about. It's usually, if you want to have a private trust like Fifth Third Bank, then your Holy Discretionary Trust should be a separate, clear document. If you use Community Fund, it's a separate document. Some attorneys will put them inside the trust. I've talked to a lot of banks. They really they hate that. So they want your Holy Discretionary Trust to be its own standalone document. It's easier for them. And again, if you were my client and you're diagnosed with Parkinson's, I'm going to say, listen, we need to get some money into this Holy Discretionary Trust for the benefit of your child now. What can you live without? Because you're going to be on Medicaid. There's no way around it. So we got to start pulling your money away. Let's get rid of some of it now. What do you need? Because in the end, you're going to be in a nursing home anyway. So let's get stuff moved. And the advantage of that Holy Discretionary Trust, whatever the child doesn't use, can go to your other kids. So it's still, and then I'm going to make it irrevocable. There's a lot going on there. That's way too many things that I've talked about, but that's when I would fund it during your lifetime. Some parents just want to fund it because they want to see how it's working. And that's fine. The reason at community fund we're not crazy about that is because then like you're getting all these fees and people are like, well, we're not really using it for that. And we're like, yeah, that's why we told you not to fund it.
Yeah.
And then also, you know, then they're like, they'll be like, you should invest more in tech. And we're like, yeah, we have a professional investment advisor. That's what we pay them for.
Right.
That, you know, it's not just your kid, it's everybody. And we need the money to last for everyone to, you know, so it's, our goal, again, it's, you know, we're more aggressive than some of the other pooled trusts, but we still really need to protect that money. We need to protect as much of the principal as we can while ensuring some growth, while hoping for some growth. We can't ensure growth because it's invested, but we always keep a certain amount in cash that's not invested at all. Then, you know, protect, and then, you know, 40, 60 up to at most 60% is in the stock market.
So we joined tonight because we got a text message from some of our local services, but I'm not sure if Melissa or how we could maybe get a copy of this information that you're projecting tonight.
Sure. And you can also email me, but Melissa has that. And I did send it to her, but I did make some corrections. So I'm gonna send it to you again, Melissa.
Yeah, I'd like a copy of it too.
I checked my email, Laura, and I am not seeing it. Let me.
Okay, I sent it to you twice and it wasn't in my sent. So, and I didn't understand. So I'm gonna email it not from my community fund email. So it'll get, but it'll still say Drake, so you'll know it's me.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know why I kept sending it and I was checking my sent and it never said it was sent, but then it started, so I stopped paying attention. So I stopped looking.
It is strange. I'm looking in my junk folder. It's not there either. So it must have gotten lost in cyberspace.
We switched to this Outlook email, and let me just tell you, I hate Outlook email. I believe I'm not like the biggest Google fan in the world, but their email rocks my world, and Outlook does not. And ever since we've switched to it, I just have a harder time controlling my email. Like I do a lot more off my phone than I did before, because on the computer, it's just cumbersome. So I find, and I don't think it works.
Melissa, who are you with, or do?
I am with Riverside.
You're at Riverside, okay.
Yes, I'm the Community Awareness and Opportunities Director at Riverside. I coordinate these educational programs.
Okay, great.
And I'm the one who sent out the text message.
Yeah, Aaron knew that. I didn't.
Yeah.
Aaron knew
it. Well, and I think, Melissa, you've had Social Security come in and someone from the Social Security Administration come and talk about benefits, right?
Correct. And we have one scheduled in April. I don't have that date at the top of I can look that up real quick, but we do have another one scheduled in April to talk about the Social Security disability benefits.
Yeah, and I strongly suggest the families go to those. It's really so eye-opening. There, you know, you ask like, what about my benefits? Because I think people think, oh, my kid's not getting SSI, or oh, my kid's already getting SSI. I don't need this. But there's a lot about you that comes into play. And I always like to mention it, but then I'm like, but it's not my world, so I'm not going to say more. I just want you to, ask Social Security about it, because I think it's really important to understand how this all comes into play. And again, and also that's the thing. That's why it's so important that you ask the attorney questions. So when you're interviewing an attorney, and let me make it clear, you're interviewing the attorney. Now, as an attorney, I have fired clients, but very rarely. But because, you know, money's money. But you are paying them. They're going to work for you. If you don't like them, don't go to them. If you're uncomfortable with them, you definitely don't want to go to them. If you think, I'm not sure if they understand this, run. There are attorneys in Dayton who specialize in this. There are a couple attorneys in Miami who dabble effectively in it. And I think the whole thing is it depends how complicated your situation is. And that's really relevant. Like Carol, to me, 2 children with a disability, your situation is more complicated than a lot of others. So there might be, so for you, if I were in yours, you know, you might want to create a joint trust for the boys, or each of them has their own wholly discretionary master trust. And when one of them dies, whatever's left goes into the other one's wholly discretionary master trust. And then what's left goes to your daughter. That might be what you want if you wanted to do the pooled trust. If you're like, I don't want to do a pooled trust, I really want my own private trust, then now you want to go to somebody who's confident enough to create a joint trust. Because that's
So how do we find out about these people that specialize? I mean, does Riverside have any, know of any people?
You can email me and I will send you attorneys who've worked with us, worked with Community Fund. And then Gudorf and Dayton, they do a lot of it. And then if you're willing to travel, there are people all over the state. And you have to remember, when I said, these attorneys are not the people you're going to hang out with the rest of your life. You're going to meet with them once or twice in person, and that's usually about it. So, there are attorneys all over the state who do specialize that. There's also the Special Needs Alliance. They have a list of attorneys. And then the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, they have attorneys listed there. And a lot of elder law attorneys also do the disability world, but you have to be careful with that. So
I just looked at my husband's retirement and I'm shocked at how much more money the boys would get. I didn't even know about it. I mean, it's more than double. It's 2.5 times what they get now.
Yep. I would have thought so. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot more. That's why I'm like, and given your ages and their ages, it's unlike the situation with my aunt was really strange that she ran out of money, that she went back on SSI. But even then, she was in her 80s before she was almost in her 80s on SSI. So
there's so much I think I don't know about this stuff that I need to know. I don't know how I can learn it all.
So it's important. And that's why. But when you have 2 kids, you need to talk to them because again, it's not my world. So I know like if you there's a max, so they both might not get that because there's it's not just one kid gets it, that divides. But there's still a monthly maximum. I have a friend who her husband died and she had 4 little kids. They reached the maximum, right?
Okay.
And so it wasn't 4 times, but I think it was more than 3 times. So, but I don't. That's why I'm like, again, that's why I'm like, Social Security isn't. I know enough to dabble and maybe give you bad advice. So instead I say, you should talk to Social Security about that. Because there's more than what they're getting now, definitely. How much more, I don't know. But more, no matter what, they won't need to pay you rent because they'll be off SSI. So that's already more money they would keep in their pocket each month. I mean, you can still charge them rent if you want to.
Right. Melissa, I have a question for you. How do I get on how do I get invited to these meetings? I mean, how did I get in? Well, I knew through Alicia. Alicia told me about it. Alicia, my SSA person.
We send out information through One Call Now. And if you are on our One Call Now list, which if you have 2 sons that are served, you should be receiving that information. We keep that updated through our database here at Riverside. If there was a point in time when you opted out of our notifications, you may not be receiving them.
I don't remember. Yeah.
I can look up your information here, or you can.
Would it be by email, or how would I be notified?
We normally send out a voice call, a text, and an email. This time we just sent out a text message because I think the text and the email are most effective for things like this because it includes the embedded link. A voice message is a little more difficult to try to put in a really long link for people to log on for, but it's a very easy system. And I can, if you're able to use the chat feature here and you're able to put in your last name, I can look in the system right now and update that information for you.
Like right now? How do you do that? Chat?
I can take care of it right now. If you open up the chat window and you don't send it to everyone, you can just specify my name and that message will come to just me.
Okay. So put in your name. What should I put? Melissa?
There should be a drop-down menu where it says everyone or.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see. Okay, Melissa. Okay. And then what am I supposed to say?
Put in your first and last name
Okay,
your son's names, and then give me your phone number that you'd like to have this information sent to, preferably a cell phone if you have one that receives text.
yeah. Okay, do you need my email also, or?
Yeah, if you want to give that to us, we can make sure. That way, if something goes crazy, your email server goes down and we're sending out the information in 2 ways, you'll be sure to get
And then I didn't put my son's names.
it. I just want to make sure I sync it up with your son's name because we typically track this information by the person served.
Okay, and then my phone number. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to, and maybe, I don't think I'm getting any notifications.
I'm not sure.
I don't know, I get so many things, I don't.
I know. And
Okay.
sometimes when there's just an avalanche of information coming your way, things do get lost in the volume, but I'll double check to make sure you're in the system and that you.
Did you, so did you get my messages?
Yes, I'm seeing them right now. So
Okay, cool.
I'm able to open it up on my other screen. So I'll take care of that for you.
Okay, great, thank you, I appreciate it.
And Chase, you have a question? Do you have a question?
Hi, my name is April. Chase is my son.
Oh,
And
okay.
the reason I would have a question about will Drake or Community Trust do the living trust for the parents?
So
Yeah.
Community Fund does not, no. So we don't provide legal work. That's why we require you have an attorney. So yeah, we don't do that. So because again, you need, like I like Community Fund, and I know some attorneys who I still tell people to go to, and they're like, no, don't do that. I'm like, okay, that's a decision that ultimately you need to make. So we need an outside source to give you that advice because it's
Thank
a
you.
conflict. Yep. But like, if you need the name of an attorney, you can always email me and I can give you a ton of names. So I mean, like I said, how close they are to you, I don't know, but there's the one in Dayton's that we see a lot. We have a couple of attorneys in Miami County you can meet with that have used us, and so we can give you their names and you can interview them and decide if they're who you want to go with or not. And I always really do stress this: you're hiring them, you don't have to hire them.
Gotcha.
So any attorney should be willing to talk to you for 30 minutes. And they'll have a cap like 30 minutes, and I'm not going to bill you for that. And if they're going to, no, I don't talk to you for this X amount of dollars, then look at the next one. There's lots of attorneys who will at least have a conversation with you about what their view of it is and explain what their fees are based on what you're interested in. But if you go past, but most of them will charge you more if you go past 30 minutes. But you can usually kind of, here's our situation. What do you recommend? And you can ask them those questions. What's SSI? What's SDI? How does SSDAC relate to all this? What are the waivers? How do you stay abreast of special needs law? What kind of organizations are you a member of? How many trusts have you drafted? How many private trusts have you drafted? These are the kinds of questions you need to ask an attorney. And if they're hesitant to give you that information, then that would raise flags to me. So don't hire them.
Thank you.
I'm very brutal about that. I was just involved in a case where the beneficiary passed away. The beneficiary's mom died, and then they hired a very big law firm in Cincinnati to draft all the documents because the girl just inherited everything, so she was going to lose some of her benefits. She was not on a waiver, so she was really just going to lose SSI. And she inherited a lot of money, and SSI is $781 a month, and they put it all into a Medicaid payback trust, and they drafted a will that when she died, everything went in, all of her stuff went into the Medicaid payback trust, and then she died 18 months later. So all of this money should have gone to her kids, but for reasons that I do not agree with, I mean, it was all placed into a Medicaid payback trust. They paid a lot of money to this law firm, and in my opinion, it was massive malpractice. And they did it because I think they were like, oh, this is a big famous law firm. And yeah, and you paid a fortune for really bad advice. And the attorney, I don't know this attorney. I've never seen them in any, we have a Medicaid roundtable in Hamilton County, and some of the other county attorneys join in. And, they're people who are staying abreast of this stuff. And this guy's not involved in any of it. And he drafted a horrible document. So beware, I personally thought they should have sued for malpractice because it was. And, but, you know, they chose not to pursue that route. That's up to them. That's fine. But, you know, it's easy to be intimidated by attorneys, and I just don't let yourself be, because just because they're at a big name firm doesn't mean this is what they do and they know what they're doing. And you have to feel comfortable with them. I met a woman who's on her third trust because she goes to these attorneys and then she doesn't really trust them, and she goes to somebody else who sells her a new trust. And it's like, you know, stop, just stop. Interview, feel confident with someone before you make a decision like that. So, I don't understand why she's paying all that money, but whatever. Everyone has their own process, but it's your choice to hire someone. So if you're not comfortable with them, don't do it.
So if I email you my email address, can you give me some attorneys that are around here?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, so it's SOH. So Sam, well, Southern Ohio.
So if I just chat and send you my email, can you just, or no?
So my email's not working, as we discovered from Melissa. So
Oh.
so I'm not sure what's going on.
Okay.
It's just SOH, Southern Ohio.
SOH.
At communityfundohio.org. It's really long, but the other one was all our initials. It was confusing. So
.org. Okay, I will email you, and I just don't know if our attorney that we have really knows what he's doing either. I don't know.
Yeah, I can tell you they're on a list. I mean, you know, so I might not know them. Now I will say up in Miami County, that's harder. Like in Hamilton County, I feel like if I don't know you, it's because you don't do this. But in some of the other counties, I don't see them as often. I do know some of the attorneys up in the Dayton area though. So,
okay.
I'm happy.
Okay, thank you.
Did we have any other questions?
I don't think so.
Oh, good. Well, you know, so that's my email. I'm going to send this to Melissa. She'll have the sheet. I'll re-email it from another account, and I will put my email and phone number on there.
Okay.
Like I said, I can't give you individualized legal advice, but I can answer all your questions. Just not giving you individualized legal advice. So we want to be a resource for all of you. So you can always feel free to call, reach out, and ask any questions. Happy to help, and hopefully we'll get you pointed in the right direction.
Okay,
and
sounds.
Follow up with Melissa and go to the April meeting about Social Security, because I think
okay. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I need to learn as much as I can, even though I get more confused than I started with, I think.
so most people listen to a presentation to this like 4 to 5 times before it makes sense. I know. I'll never forget. I had a woman who was in one of my presentations, and they hear it multiple times, and then I'll never forget. I remember exactly where I was. I know that I had talked to her at least 5 or 6 times. Plus, she came up to me at events all the time. And I'm sitting there and I was explaining something. She goes, "Oh my God, I finally get it." She's like, all this time. She goes, "I have a trust. I never understood why I was doing any of it." She goes, "It makes sense now." So it's not the kind of thing, you know, it's years of getting used to. That's one of my arguments why I'm never crazy about naming your typical child as the trustee. Think of the number of times you've come and heard this and not understood it. And now you're asking them to go to 0 to 60 overnight. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So
my daughter's a little bit nervous about it because she is the trustee and she doesn't understand, you know, and if I don't understand it, how can I? So she's a little nervous about the whole thing.
And that's why I'm not. There's a book by Barbara Jenkins, Jankins, and it's about being a trustee of a special needs trust, and it's a lot harder than being a trustee of another trust. So that's one of the things that I'm always a little bit worried when people say they've named their typical child as a trustee. So
our attorney just keeps saying to make sure you put it in a trust so that it doesn't have to go through probate or whatever.
Right. So I would be very worried about that, because of this, the community, the special needs trust and probate are really irrelevant. I mean, it will avoid probate, but that's really not what it's about. Special needs trusts are not about avoiding probate. They are about protecting assets from Medicaid and Social Security. And so they're very different than a typical trust.
Okay. That's just what he kept saying, that you need to set up a trust so that
Avoid
it doesn't have to go through the court and go through all that. So my daughter couldn't get to, yeah, that was just,
Yeah.
I need to go revisit him or someone anyway. So I may just go to someone else.
So, yeah, I'm not sure. So but I'm saying like, and that's a factor, the whole avoiding probate, but that's not really the biggest factor when we talk about special needs. It's really about making sure it's properly drafted so it's not counted as a resource or an asset.
Right. Okay. I probably should have had my husband, but he's down with the boys. So I probably should have had him listen to this too. So at least if I can get the sheet that he can at least read over it, and because I don't think I'll be able to explain it too well to him.
Well, I do want to just point out real quickly that this is being recorded. So if this is something that he could maybe watch at a different time, that might be something that would be helpful to you.
So how do you get a recording? How do you look that? I'm not very computer savvy. I don't understand how to get to the.
Well, honestly, I'm going to have to double check. Laura and I have switched hosts on this, so I'm not sure if the recording is going to go to her computer or mine. But
okay.
We'll double check and see which one is downloading it after this session is over.
Okay.
And I can email everyone either the attachment or the link to that the video of the recording after we're all done.
Oh, okay. Because it'd be good if he could hear this too. If we're going to go to an attorney or talk to anybody, he needs to hear this too. Yeah.
So Melissa, I think you have the recording. I don't.
You think I do?
It's on mine underneath, it doesn't say record, but under yours, it says it's being recorded.
Okay, and I do see that I have control. I can stop the recording if I want.
Yeah, I think it's you. Yeah, because I mean, that's why when you said that, I'm like, I'm gonna stop sharing. So we make sure. So you get it and I don't. I'm like, I don't want control.
Okay.
To get that sent to everybody along with the document that Laura's been sharing with everybody.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah, that'd be super. Okay, well, I appreciate this.
Well, thank you everybody who logged on tonight, and the two SSAs. I got to give you guys props, Michelle and John. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you everyone. And once again, I believe everyone private messaged me your email address as I was updating that in the One Call Now system as we were talking here. So I will get those sent out to you here in a little bit.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Have a good evening.
Thank
you.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.